and welcome to Can Month Day 20, take number 2, because there was something wrong with the original footage. So that's why we're a little darker in lighting right now, and I have just finished watching the first National Leaders Debate, if you couldn't tell from my Twitter. And it's fine. Everything's fine. I'm in a really great headspace right now. It's totally cool. But what we're actually talking about today is Annabel by Kathleen, which I first heard about on Colleen from Little Ghost Creations channel, who I've talked about previously, and is Loveliest Human. So the story starts off in 1968 in Croydon Harbour, which is a small, isolated village in Newfoundland. And living there are Jacinta and Treadway, who are a married couple, and Jacinta gives birth to a child who is intersex and has both male and female genitalia. And the only other person to know about this is their neighbor, Thomasina. To start off with Treadway, he is a very Ron Swanson-esque character. He is very focused on self-reliance and going out into the woods and being able to survive on your own and being one with nature and just not having time for other people's silliness and not understanding people not being able to be self-reliant. And he has this very particular and set way of viewing the world. So as a character, he's very easy to understand and it's easy to see where he's coming from, but he is still by no means a flat character. Jacinta isn't like this at all. It's kind of harder to pin her down as being like a specific type of character in the same way as Treadway. But her difference to Treadway comes out particularly in terms of their thoughts about their child. Jacinta doesn't believe that there needs to be anything done about her child because she doesn't see her child being intersex as being a problem. She thinks that there is enough room in the world for her child to be the way they are. And for instance, she even talks about how whenever she imagined her child grown up without interference from a judgmental world, she imagined its male and female halves as complementing each other and as being secretly, almost magically powerful. So she actually sees this as being a strength. Treadway views Jacinta's unwillingness to act as being a position of indecisiveness. Treadway thinks that something needs to be done. There's a decision that needs to be made. And so Jacinta has to go to a doctor and there is a phallometer test done to measure through whatever hormones the child is slightly more male or female, and their child's test comes out as being slightly more male than female. So the vagina is closed and the child becomes known as Wayne. However, Jacinta and Thomasina both feel that this was the wrong choice of gender because they always have felt that their child, Wayne, is actually a secret daughter. It's interesting too because throughout the whole beginning of the book, up to the point before the child becomes Wayne, there's no use of pronouns, obviously. And then the second he is introduced into the story, it's very jarring and it seems wrong. But as Wayne grows up, he starts to identify more and more as being a girl or with the feminine. And there is a lot of really intense family dynamics that go on with this because Wayne was not told about the circumstances of his birth and his parents won't tell him, and they're both operating under their own ways of overcompensating. Again, Jacinta feels that Wayne is her daughter, whereas Treadway acts hyper masculine around Wayne and pressures him so much because he's so worried about Wayne not being one of the normal boys of Croydon Harbour. And in a lot of ways, this book did remind me of The Birth House, because what I found in a lot of East Coast fiction, or the East Coast fiction that I've read, is there's this kind of magical quality. It's not exactly mysticism, but there's just this pervasive element of myth and a different understanding of a relationship to the land. In this book in particular, Treadway is half Innu, which is the closest indigenous community to them. And then also in The Birth House, Dora Rare, one of her ancestors, is also an indigenous person as well. So there always feels like there's this little drop for a consideration of a different like ontology or understanding of the world in terms of how the story is written. And that's particularly pertinent to some of the discussions in Annabel as well, because they do talk about Croydon Harbor as being a settled space or not a fully settled space. So one of the things they talk about is like the land is essentially its own character in the story. Like it has that much of a presence. So there is a lot of discourse around Croydon Harbor being too wild to be truly settled, even though that's clearly false because they're all settlers except for Treadway, who's the only person who has a different positionality in that discussion. So like there will be instances where like they'll be in a church and they're talking about how a specific animal that's used for decoration, or the fact that there's a specific kind of wood that was shipped from Britain to be used, but that kind of wood doesn't belong there. It's not a native species of tree, but again, still part of the settler colonial project. One of the best parts about this book, and something that Kathleen Winter does so well, is her discussion of relationships and family and dynamics, and also gender organization in those dynamics. Like it is just done so well and so complexly and addressed on so many levels. There's also a lot of stuff in here around norms of mental health and mourning. Something else that's really emphasized and explored in the story is how Wayne is treated by the medical field. You don't get as much of it when he's younger, besides like allusion to visits and that kind of thing. And because even when doctors are very nice and they're not operating under like malicious intent or have a lot of like biases against Wayne, there's still never an innate concern for his humanity, and he is always treated to an extent as like a medical anomaly. Something else that I think is done really well in the book is when Wayne is deciding that he doesn't really want to be Wayne anymore as he's learned more about himself. He also doesn't feel like he can truly be Annabel either, which is the side of himself that he always wanted to be. Like Annabel is the feminine part of him. But he doesn't feel like he can ever like fully achieve this because of the fact that he was brought up to be Wayne and the hormones that he was taking to kind of push the masculine on him. And he doesn't necessarily want to give up everything about Wayne. And what I really like that was done in the book is that Wayne found comfort in being more androgynous, as it's described in the book, or having a more non-binary identity. Because even within transgenderism, like it's not necessarily a binary, right? Sexual orientation and gender, not a binary, because androgyny or non-binary identities are just as legitimate, and that is how some people feel like at home and most comfortable with themselves. I liked the way that this was done in the book and throughout the whole story. However, I'm a cisgendered person. I've never experienced the type of oppression that transgendered individuals do, and I don't know what Kathleen Winter's position is either, so there could have been something problematic about it that I just didn't pick up on. So please let me know if there is something that I missed. So again, this book is really, really good. However, the last third of the book was because in the last third of the book, there's some stuff that just seems really inconsistent with the character of Treadway. As you may have gathered, there's a point in the book where Wayne decides that he doesn't want to just be Wayne anymore. And part of that process for Wayne is not taking the hormones that he's been taking his whole life. So he discusses this with Treadway, and Treadway kind of threatens him by saying like, okay, you can do that, but like what's gonna happen to you? Like how are people gonna react? Think about how terrible your life's gonna be. And then something does happen to Wayne and he completely changes. So it might have been because of that he did a little bit of an about face there, but that link wasn't made explicitly clear in the story, because at this point you're getting it a lot more from Wayne's point of view and a lot less from Treadway's. So because of this, his all of a sudden like support for Wayne just seemed a little bit disingenuous, and it just didn't feel consistent at all. And I'm not trying to say that Treadway would never be supportive of Wayne. Like, that's not what I'm saying. I'm not saying there's no way that would have happened for his character, because that is something I could see happening in terms of like a character evolution. It's just that it was done in like a moment that wasn't made clear to the reader, that it just didn't feel quite right. And I liked with the epilogue and like just before the epilogue, I liked where the story was going. I liked where it was headed. I was with Kathleen Winter, and then it just didn't quite finish on the right note, if that makes sense. Like, the story was going to where it felt like it should be, and then it just stopped short of where it felt like it should have really finished. However, besides that, this book is really, really good, and I do highly encourage you to read it.